hear a lot about respect in Ottawa, and I hear a lot about fairness. You notice that word comes up in a lot of politicians' speech these days, fairness. It's not fair. It's not fair enough. We need to do more fairness for the middle class, which has translated into things like higher taxes for small business, higher taxes in general, carbon taxes, that somehow we can tax our way to fairness. Somehow we can dance around some of the most prominent issues in this country and be more fair. But when I stand here today, and I look at the fact that there are so many of you standing out here who would never have ever thought to come out to a political rally. Not once. How many of you, is this your first political rally? How many of you, is this the first time you came out? Now, why is that? Why is that? Because Alberta and the energy sector does one thing. It works. It works hard. And when we think about fairness, we think about a few things. We think about providing for our families and providing for our communities. We think about making the country a better place. We just want to work. That's all that anybody here wants to do, is just work. So what's fair? What's fair for people who just want to work and just want to do things that are right? It's not fair to say that the jobs that we do are dirty. It is not fair to denigrate an industry that provides energy products in one of the most ethical and sustainable ways in the world. It's not fair to run an ideological political agenda that somehow can equate Canadian environmental standards to Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, and China. That's not fair. It's not fair to let vocal minority groups that don't run on fact to control the fate and prosperity of an entire country. It's not fair to ask us to be quiet and just take it, while the rest of the country looks and says, maybe it is dirty jobs. Oh, it's just Alberta. I've heard that. Have you heard this one? Just Alberta. Their time came. They've had their time. That is not what My Canada is. My Canada understands that the people who work in the energy sector build this country. My Canada understands that what's fair is understanding that a strong Alberta, a strong energy sector means a strong Canada. So where are we at in terms of the definition of fair? All right, let's go through this. For over a decade, we have had a growing movement in this country that pretends that what we do in our energy industry is not environmentally sustainable. Yet we know for a fact that we have some of the world's most stringent, most robust environmentally regulatory processes in the world. We know that when we produce energy, we're doing it in an ethical way. I can vote, I can be in Parliament, I can drive. That's a change from other countries that produce oil, isn't it? That's something we should be proud of. So let's talk about getting to fairness here. Why is the Trans Mountain Pipeline so important? Okay, fairness. We don't get a fair price for our energy products right now. Just by building out this pipeline, we will close the gap on the price differential that the U.S. pays us to take our energy product. Just having that market diversity makes our products more sustainable because we're getting a better price for it. And think about that. Right now, because we're not getting that price, all of that resource revenue, those savings, those jobs, that's going to make the United States richer. Why are we building hospitals in the United States with our energy products rather than doing it here at home? That's reason number one. number two is that our pipelines, many of our pipelines are already at capacity. How many of you down here work in one of these towers or around here? How many of you could do these stats better than I can? We need this product, we need this pipeline in order to get our product to market. It's just so simple. Yet, here's what's happened. I have watched this, much to my chagrin. We have a government who has stood up and put in place some of the most confusing, unscientific environmental changes to our regulatory process. Bill C-69. The Pipeline Association itself stood in front of our parliamentary committee and said this bill that was supposed to give, quote, social license to build out the pipeline, what did it do? They actually said no pipelines will be built in Canada under this bill. And that's what our government has done. Justin Trudeau has also done this. He's also flat out canceled a pipeline that went through a regulatory process. He made a political decision on the Northern Gateway pipeline. What did that send? That sent a message to investors around the world. Why do business in Canada? And here's the great lie. Here's my favorite. Justin Trudeau coming to Alberta, to Fort McMurray, and said, oh, it's Stephen Harper's fault. The reality is that under a previous government, I would be remiss to point out that we added over 183 billion barrels of capacity to our pipeline system. And what did Trudeau do? The reality is that many pipelines, we had Energy East, there was Northern Gateway, there were all of these pipelines. We had people willing to invest over $20 billion into pipelines in Canada. And where are those projects now? They're off the table. And that's because this Prime Minister has added instability and uncertainty to the regulatory review process, and he's hired people into senior positions in his government who whisper into his ear after privately saying no pipeline should be built. And that's the reality. And you think that Kinder Morgan Board of Directors, you think that they don't notice that? Of course they do. It's a big risk to put that much money into the pipeline development. Of course it is. We need stability. We need certainty. Now, I've got to talk to you about social license for a minute, okay? You know what you need to build a pipeline? You need an actual license. And that's what the Trans Mountain Pipeline has. It has an actual license. That actual license went through years and years of review. It has an actual license. This social license that was supposed to be created by a $40 megaton price on carbon that will do nothing to reduce greenhouse gases, but do everything to create an environment that takes money out of your pockets and takes uncertainty away, or adds uncertainty to this process, is not going to build the pipeline out. Now, Minister Jim Carr and Justin Trudeau, when forced with this crisis that has been 2 years in the making, in the last 24 hours, guess what their line is? Did any of you watch this yesterday when Jim Carr was like forced with cameras? This is what he said: all options are on the table. Well, what options are on the table? You're being obtuse. A CBC reporter called Jim Carr obtuse, and he still said, all options are on the table. So what is that code for, energy sector? No options are on the table. We want to do nothing and hope this goes away. That is, and again, today I thought I would be addressing you because they had this hours-long cabinet meeting, hours long in Ottawa. And what happened? Nothing. He came out and did a press conference and said, all options are on the table. No options are on the table. I shouldn't be smiling because it's ridiculous. Can you imagine that? You are the natural resources minister of a natural resources producing economy for over 2.5 years, and you have no answer to this? Do your job and build the pipeline. So what? So I am going to do Justin Trudeau and Jim Carr's job for him. But how? Okay, Calgary. How are we going to do this? Let's do Justin Trudeau's job for him. Are you ready? All right. Let's give the press conference that Jim Carr should have given this afternoon. Number one, hello Canada, this project is important and we are going to do everything possible to build it out. And here's what we're going to do. Number one, we're going to invoke section 9210C of the Constitution, which, while this pipeline, yes, it's in federal jurisdiction, leftist academics who point this out all the time, it would still remove any remaining provincial barriers to the build-out, such as things like permits needed to build roads. It would show the commitment of this government to do it. Number two, this court case that's been proposed by the BC government, rather than letting it wind its way through courts for years and years and years and create uncertainty for investment, refer it directly to the Supreme Court. That would make sense. Number three, say something very simple. We are going to enforce the rule of law when it comes to protests. As the Prime Minister of Canada, perhaps Justin Trudeau should make a point of saying that parliamentarians who are getting arrested and defying the rule of law for protests in front of a nation-building project, perhaps that's not a very good thing, and perhaps that should be discouraged from the Prime Minister of Canada. Number four, the other thing that should have happened is the Prime Minister should have said, you know what, social license, that little experiment didn't work. And this $40 megaton price on carbon, it's not actually going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we're going to create some regulatory certainty by scrapping this tax. Oh, and you know what? We took to heart the feedback from people that came to our industry committee, the experts that speak on behalf of industry. And when they said the bill that we put in front of the House of Commons that was not going to allow any more pipelines to be built, we're scrapping that bill. That would help too. Now, there's been some talk about whether or not the federal government should backstop or put your tax dollars into this project. That's an option that's technically on the table right now. I'll say this. Is it fair, going back to that fairness, to all of you who have been in and out of work, who have just paid your taxes, for the Prime Minister of Canada to use that as his number one option for a problem of his own creation? No. It's disgusting. He should be looking at all of those first options in the first instance. My party put in place a motion in the House of Commons months ago that would require the Prime Minister to table a plan in the House of Commons. Every single Liberal, including Liberals from Alberta, voted against this. Now I want to talk about BC, and I want to talk about the trade war, and I want to talk about infrastructure funding and all of this sort of stuff. You know, I get your frustration. Many of you have called my office, you've emailed me, but isn't it disgusting? You know, they talk about us, they look at us, they're like, Alberta's driving a wedge in our federation. All that Alberta has ever done and ever wants to do is make this country stronger. That's right. So the fact that we're at the point where people are talking about infrastructure funding and all of these sorts of things, that is a failure on behalf of the federal government. So, in closing, there's a few things I want you to do. As James said, tweet this, tweet at the Prime Minister, write every Liberal member of Parliament, get that done. Hashtag, what is it, James? It's Build 92? Or sorry, Build KM. Hashtag Build KM. There we go. And I see my colleague Prasad Panda here. We've jointly sponsored a petition for the Prime Minister to use 92. It's www.use92.ca. So, I want all of Canada to know what I see here. I see people who just want to work. I see people who would never come out to a rally, who are just proud. I see a diverse crowd of people who care about this country. So I ask you today to stand with me, stand against the incompetence of this government, and stand for the build-out of Trans Mountain Pipeline.